Hey, what if I told you some of America's grandest government buildings were not built by us, but inherited from a forgotten age? Marble columns, gold domes, cathedral ceilings, intricate carvings rivaling European palaces built in towns with barely 5,000 people, all allegedly constructed without electricity, diesel machinery, or modern tools, but by men with horses, ropes, and handsaws. Would you believe that? Wait till you see some of these buildings I'm about to show you, because this isn't just coincidence. This is a pattern. And once you see and recognize this pattern, you can't unsee it. Hang tight as we jump right on into this episode. Hey, welcome back to Encounter Truth, where we are going to question everything and challenge the status quo. I've been watching a lot of, don't know if you know his channel or not, but his name is Ricardo, and I believe David Shane over at Contend for the Faith. They have a podcast called Question the Narrative, and I almost just said Question the Narrative. Great channel. If you guys don't know them, go check them out. I love those guys. They do a lot of great research and have helped me in my research to, continue going down this path that few dare to go on because it is uncomfortable. And that is the thing here. When we put everything underneath the microscope and we really begin to question the narrative or challenge the status quo, everything that we have been taught from a mainstream narrative, from public school indoctrination, from I'm 39, so back in the early 90s, super late 80s, when I was in pre-K and kindergarten going into elementary school, we are taught how to think. We were taught what to think, not how to think. And most of us blindly accept all of this without ever questioning it. And it wasn't until 2015 that I began questioning the very things I was receiving from the pulpit in church. And I was beginning to understand that most of what I was taught behind the pulpit is just traditions of men, and that there's a lot of lies that are integrated in with the truth. 2019, I had came into biblical cosmology, and I had to look at the Bible for what it really says about the earth and it being stationary, and there being a firmament and waters above and waters below, and whole nother topic for another video. But it forces you to begin to question things that are taught in the mainstream scope of the narrative. And so this video, I definitely want to shine the light, if you will, onto a narrative that most of us have accepted in lieu of our history. And that is another part of this channel, of exposing the lies we believed in regards to mainstream history. And this video is in part by me looking in, it's how I got into understanding the little season. And I'll share my screen here in just a moment to show you some of these beautiful buildings that I had looked up right here in our own country, the United States, and these are Capitol buildings. And what's interesting is that these buildings, let's just dive into it, because I want all of you to really understand just how these are really awesome. And I want to start with the Iowa State Capitol. And if I can pull over my screen share. Right. Here we go. This is the Iowa State Capitol. And when we look at this thing, I mean, my goodness. So you can see that they have this little scaffolding over here on the left-hand side that almost makes it appear as if they were constructing this thing. The Iowa State Capitol was dedicated on January 17th, 1884, and it was completed sometime in 1886. The history timeline that we're given is that it was built in 1871 to 1886. Okay, somewhat believable, right? Maybe? I don't know. This is the only state capitol in the United States that has 5 domes. There's one right here, one behind it, 2 on the symmetrical opposing side, and 1 directly in the middle. But this thing is just an incredible. I mean, look at the inside. That, when you look at these railings, staircase here, how just the design. I mean, unbelievable. And it's been a long time, probably 18 years, since I've been to the state capitol down in Austin, Texas. But I remember that I was told that if you stand in the direct center and stand up and talk, the way the acoustics are in this, it's a weird feeling that you get because the way the sound comes through here, and it's really awesome. But when you look at this video, if I can go back to where it shows them all again, they even have, look at that, Apollo, I mean Lady Liberty. Interesting how there's a mini statue here of this sun god, which again a whole nother topic. Go check out JT Follows JC and Contend for the Faith Ricardo, and then they actually just did a video for the 4th of July. I wanted to, but I was like, everyone else is doing it. Maybe I'll do it next year when I compile more research. They've been researching a lot more than I have, and so go check them out as they'll help you. So some things to like, when we're looking at all these buildings here, some things to consider is that these buildings were supposedly built by pioneers with no power tools or funding. And that's the thing, is like, what if they weren't, like, what if we didn't build them at all? What if we had somehow inherited these things? The Iowa State Capitol that was completed in 1886 with a gold-plated dome and 5 domes total, built in a city that was barely 30 years old at the time. No clear record of how they transported, carved, and installed such heavy materials. And that's quite interesting to think right there, right? Because you have 5 domes, a gold gilded, if we can pull this one back up again when they make it look like they're working on here. This gold gilded main dome, and it has huge marble staircases, Corinthian columns. This is over 300,000 square feet. And the estimated cost was 2.9 million in the 1800s. This just because of inflation today, this would be about 95 to 100 million, 100 plus million today. All right, so let's think about the manpower it would have required to make this. You would need 500 plus stonemasons, 200 plus iron workers, dozens, and I mean dozens of sculptors, glass workers, and artisans. And the interesting part is that this is all done without electric cranes or pneumatic tools. Any of you who watch my videos, if you are a masonry worker, you're in construction, you understand blueprints, building costs, how things are constructed, plans, records, where they're kept. This just kind of blows my mind. The gold leaf for dome likely shipped in from the East or Europe. The marble and granite was transported by horse-drawn wagons and steamboat. We're just thinking logistics here. There was no rail system in Des Moines until the late 1860s, and even then, rail access was limited. So what's the problem that we have here? All right, Iowa's population in the 1870s was still underdeveloped. To have skilled European-style artisans, that would be something that would be scarce, in my opinion, and the supply chain would be quote-unquote primitive for a building of this grandeur, wouldn't you think? I mean, again, take a look at the intricate detail of everything in here. The ceilings, all the wood decoration. Go back. Columns up here. I mean, what a magnificent building. So was it built? You let me know down in the comments. Did we build this, or was this something that we inherited? Founded. All right. Another one that I want to show you, which don't really have, we can look something up that would be interesting. I don't have the actual, this one is not standing today. And that's the thing too, is many of these that were founded are not standing today. They either were demolished, they all have a fire narrative, they've all been burnt, parts of them were burnt, they were remodeled. I don't know. This one here. And let's see if I can zoom in. Well, that's about as close as I can get, but just enough. So this is the New Mexico Territorial State Capitol, built in 1886 in Santa Fe, and then it was destroyed coincidentally by fire in 1892, as you see down here on the bottom, just under the picture. So this again, who lived out here in New Mexico in this time? It's again a Greek revival style that's supposed to look like the U.S. Capitol. Construction began before statehood was even in existence. Its cost? The plans suggest a multi-million dollar structure even then. That would be 30 to 50 million today. New Mexico was barely settled. There was no skilled European stonemasons or glassworkers on site. This is a time that we're told that was run by like Indians. So is this like enslaved labor? There's no record. The desert location had no industrial supply line. Building materials would have had to have been dragged by oxen through rugged terrain. Yet the planned layout included domes and columns. So what's the problem here? Where was the water, the support industry, the electricity? Even Santa Fe's own local historians admit that this was over ambitious. Doesn't quite make sense to me if you were wondering about. It's just really, really incredible to think they can get away with telling us some lies. And, I was duped to believe it as well. The one that we have, let's see if I have a link to this one here that they have in place now. Let's see if I can somehow drag this over. All right, so supposedly this is the state capitol they got today. This building here. And they went from that to that. Can't get the two side by side in a shot, but that to that. A stucco walled, probably stone and plaster from this amazing building over here. That just that right there in of itself doesn't even add up, right? Let's look at another one. I don't want to talk about Hartford, Connecticut, because that's another interesting one. And when we think about the Northeast, supposedly from our story, as 1776, the Revolutionary War, and before that, in the 1600s, people coming over to settle in the 13 colonies and that area up on the Northeast that we call New England. So the thing is about some of these, their advanced architecture before infrastructure. These buildings appeared in places that just there was no plumbing, roads, or even rail lines, but were adorned with these domes, turrets, imported stone, and architectural flourishes that shouldn't or should have required a massive experienced workforce, in my opinion, especially just going around and looking at how they do construction today, even on highways. And highways take years to complete, it seems, just to construct bridges. And most of the time they shut highways down at nighttime, and by the time they finish them, they already have to redo them again. And just why do so many Capitol buildings, especially post 1850s, look like carbon copies of ancient Roman, Greek, or Gothic architecture? Think Minnesota, Colorado, and Texas. It's almost like there was like a standard template, or perhaps even repurposed ruins that were rebuilt, reskinned, or reattributed to something we quote unquote founded. Why are these buildings in relatively poor or undeveloped regions, as we looked at with Iowa? Why castles in swampy Baton Rouge? Gold domed palaces in Pioneer, Iowa. populations of less than 5,000. This is not consistent with the frontier narrative that we've been taught, right? Meanwhile, Abraham Lincoln, that was born in 18 whatever, was born in a shack. And then the fire mysteries. You know, many original territorial or early state buildings were either, as this one was in 1992, destroyed by fire, lost in a flood, or mysteriously raised, similar to reset narratives. So was this a way to erase what didn't fit that narrative? Uh, it's something definitely worth asking. And did early state governments really commission these on their own, or were they inherited from a previous civilization, millennial reign, or era? You know, like the tail end of the millennial kingdom. Could these buildings be evidence of a pre-reset architecture that was rebranded during the so-called Little Season when Satan was loosed? And so, why do these buildings share the same geometrical symbolism and architectural themes as ancient temples and European cathedrals? Other questions that we want to ask. Also, are we looking at mud flood survivors that were unearthed and reused? And was the Gothic revival a true revival or a cover up? Want to know your thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let's look at another one. We're going to look at Hartford, Connecticut. This is the Connecticut State Capitol. Another one that'll just blow your mind. And this is on Google Earth right here. Let me come down. See the photo up here. Just my little head is that out of the way. And you can see this whole thing over here. Just we'll take a closer look. But I want to zoom in on Google Earth because look how massive this thing is. What in the world? All right, let's click on here and look at some really cool pictures. All right, that's that right there. My goodness. I'll leave that up for just a moment. Let me move my head back up over here in the top right for you. So this is the Hartford, Connecticut State Capitol. Completed in 1878, construction began in 1871, and it opened for the General Assembly in January 1879. So, high Victorian Gothic with French and Eastern European influences. What are some of the oddities that you can look at this one here? It was designed by Richard Upjohn. Includes intricate towers, statues, and lavish material here. The central tower and sculptural details seem more like a European cathedral than a government building, in my opinion. The problem, though, is that Connecticut was certainly industrialized by then, but why adopt such an elaborate medieval Gothic style for a government facility? It's almost as if it's mimicking something older, or, as we've said, it's repurposed for something else. Back then, in that time, it was again completed in 1878. $2 million, an estimated 70 plus million today to complete something like that. So let's think of the manpower. It would still be difficult, even though this was an industrializing city. Carve out this level of detail without electric chisels, scaffolding lifts, or cranes would take thousands upon thousands of man hours. Logistically here, the materials would have to come from Vermont and beyond. Heavy stone would have to have been loaded manually or by pulley systems. The problem here with this is that the architect had died before its full completion. Richard Upjohn, he died before its full completion. Absolutely no detailed construction records, just start and end dates. How come we don't question stuff like that? Take a look through some of these. Look at that. That's beautiful. Then you can see the modern crappy building back here. Go inside. Just you can kind of see in the background there the work of the stairs, the floor, the columns, even right up here. The ceilings, the wood, the carving, how everything is just symmetrically perfect, geometrically perfect. And going up into the dome up there, just incredible shot. Arches, again, geometrically perfect. And looking up into the dome. Another interesting building there. Knowledge, interesting knowledge, history, justice. Look at the detail and the carvings of that stuff up there. I don't know what building that is, but it's somewhere in lieu of the state capitol here. Fast forwarding back out and go back to the very front. So yeah, just no detailed construction records, just a start and end date. Quite mind-boggling. How about the next one? Look at the old state capitol in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Does that look like a state capitol, or does that look more like a castle? Tell me. Maybe they're just trying to protect from people coming in down the bayou to shoot them with cannons. I don't know. So this is a neo-Gothic castle with turrets, stained glass, and pointed archways, as we can see. This was completed in 1852. It cost roughly $100,000 back then. Today it would equate to about $3 to $5 million, which is still pretty high for Louisiana's economy in the 1850s. Well, let's think about manpower. Slavery was still legal in Louisiana. Were they used? There's no official record of skilled castle masons at all in the region. How about the logistics here? This is something to consider. Very swampy terrain. We're talking below sea level. Very high humidity. There's no electricity to drain, stabilize, or reinforce foundations. Problem? Well, Mark Twain ridiculed it, called it a whitewashed castle. Makes zero sense functionally, unless symbolic or inherited. So there are some issues that we have, right? Some of the oddities that we can notice, obviously, with the picture, it looks like a medieval fortress. Why would a southern state with relatively primitive post-colonial infrastructure build a Gothic revival castle in the middle of a flood-prone zone? That's just not practical. It has to be symbolic, and we don't know why. Let's take a look at another one. This one I had to pull up actually on Google Images because there isn't, its remains are not here with us today. But this is the former Georgia state capitol in Milledgeville. It was built in 1807. Again, this is a Greek revival federal style. Some of the key oddities, abnormalities here is that Milledgeville was the state capital from 1804 to 1868, but it was essentially wilderness at that time. Why would they have this big old castle here that you can see? Just incredible. The building looks far more advanced than any surrounding structure from the early, and we mean early, 1800s. Right? So who had the capability and reason to build such a stately structure in what was essentially frontier land, once again? So, this doesn't really add up, does it? Beautiful structure, though, like when we look at some of these down here. This doesn't make sense for what it really was, you know? And 25,000 built in 1807, roughly $750,000 to $1 million today, which doesn't match the building's grandeur for what that looks like. I like this one right here. Incredible building. And how did they get the materials there? You know, Milledgeville, again, was a frontier town at the time. There was zero evidence of local labor force capable of creating any of this type of high precision stonework. The town barely had roads. The building is wildly advanced compared to the rest of the town at the time, and it's just out of place in every way. So very interesting in regards to a lot of those. It's just one of my favorite things to do because whenever I started, that was kind of how I came into really researching the Dark Ages was these magnificent, immaculate cathedrals that were just kind of all spread out across the world. And then I was like, well, what about our U.S. capitals? Those are really beautiful looking buildings too. How about them? Because they don't make sense. And so when you start to actually look up the research and look into um, these Capitol buildings, and you see that there is fire narratives, and you look at their costs, you look at the town size, just what's going on. Like we have impossible blueprints here. Go back to Iowa. Estimated modern cost today, $100 million. Town size, it's very small. Why would they need something of that big? They don't even build highways by my house that are for the population of my suburban area. Why would they build such a grandeur, castle-like structure, cathedral Gothic style structure of a town of 5,000 people? It doesn't make sense. No electricity, um, no construction photos. If there are, it's usually of already finished photos. No skilled local labor. Santa Fe, the territorial capital, makes no sense whatsoever. The town size was primitive, crawling with probably Native Americans, tribal people living in tents. Where does this building come out of nowhere? New Mexico wasn't even a state. The cost $50 million. There was no infrastructure whatsoever. It burnt down in 1892. Interesting. No labor. How could Indians be forced into slavery or captivity and used to build infrastructures of that degree if they couldn't do it themselves? And we see that they lived in teepees and huts, and that don't make sense. Connecticut, another interesting one. That was a beautiful one. $70 million in modern value. Moderate town size. Okay, more believable. No electricity. No construction photos. Any local labor that was skilled? No, not really. How about Baton Rouge? Estimated $5 million in modern value. Town size? Well, it's a swamp zone. I doubt anybody would have lived there to build a castle to that degree. Electricity? No. Construction photos? No. Skilled labor? Probably not. And how about the Milledgeville Castle that we just looked at in Georgia? Frontierland? Why have something like that out in the middle of nowhere? Estimated cost of modern value? Roughly $1 million. Electricity? No. Construction photos? No. Skilled local labor? No. So that's the thing is like, how would they have built these, right? If we're being honest with ourselves and not just playing stupid, dumb, ignorant, and accepting what they tell us blindly, they wouldn't have, right? Not without generators, cranes, global supply chains, a full workforce of architects, masons, artisans, engineers, and decades of funding, education, and coordination. Meanwhile, we have horse-drawn carts and wagons, cowboys and Indians during these times. And don't Indians circle wagons and take over and captive and pillage from the stories we're taught in school? Not saying that Indians don't exist, they do obviously, but I'm just saying I think the narrative we've been told doesn't quite add up or make sense when you start to really critically think about these things. Decades of funding, education, and coordination were needed for these highly immaculate buildings. And yet these popped up across the United States in less than 40 years, all resembling old world temples, cathedrals, or royal palaces. So the question is, were they built or were they revealed? I definitely want to know your thoughts. And I really want to understand what you have to think about these because to me it's fascinating when we look at some of these uh structures and look at their just yeah, the detail that surround these buildings is really incredible. I'm looking over here at some of these and just in awe at how they were able to build such in that time, and yet we can't do that today. We can't replicate these today. The timeline, the funding, the tools, and this has to be repurposed architecture. So what else did we inherit? That's the other key. Like when you look at all of these and when they were built, the times, just none of this really makes sense. So I appreciate you tuning in today. I wanted to do something a little different since I didn't get around to a little season video yesterday in lieu of the series that we're on. Um, Subscribe if you haven't to the channel if you want to peel back the layers and expose the deception and have just be awake, spiritually awake. There's so many of us nowadays that are lost in the churches, no passion, no drive, no purpose, no clarity. Um, and I believe, as we truly understand the deception that we're in, it draws us closer, in my opinion, to God, to know more about Him and how the enemy wants to deceive. And again, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Like, list your comments below. Still a lot of analytics show that people who watch these videos are those that are unsubscribed to the channel. Um, and which building makes you question our history the most? That's what I would like to know. Leave that down in the comments. I know I only shared 5. I'm going to do more of these types of videos because these are very fascinating to me. And I want you to consider these core categories of all of these buildings that we looked at, these 5 capitals. The scale and the size of the building, estimated cost in today's dollars, the manpower and skilled labor required during that time, the infrastructure that was needed to transport materials, and the technology limitations at that time. That's what we really need to look at. Thank you again for tuning in today as we challenge the status quo of what we've been taught. And until next time, some other things that I have up and coming in the works are still a video on the emperors, the world's fairs, and the fake future, and looking at more in-depth views of Tartaria, mud floods, and how all this ties into the great deception that we've inherited of Satan's little season of Revelation 20. Thank you so much. Until next time, my friends, God bless, and read your Bibles. Question everything.